Hey everybody, welcome to the War on Mediocrity. Once again, I'm repurposing an episode for the Managing Violence podcast, which has some amazing messages from an amazing man, and that is, of course, the world's most dangerous man, Ken Shamrock. Ken is a pioneer of MMA. He's even at the age of 56, he's in phenomenal shape, still actively engaging as a professional wrestler. Ken is an incredible human being. He's got a great message, which I think has to be shared not only with the Managing Violence Network and Managing Violence Tribe, but also with you here at the War on Mediocrity. So please enjoy this episode with Mr. Ken Shamrock. I'm joined here by Ken Shamrock, the legend, the UFC Hall of Famer, pro wrestling legend, all-around world's most dangerous man. Ken, it is an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Now, Ken, you've been interviewed a lot over the last 25 years, interviewed to death. I'm sure your story is well established for fans. So I'm going to try to ask some questions that perhaps haven't had quite as much coverage as you've done in other media. Now, your story growing up is well established. You grew up with a troubled home life. You were out on the street. You found yourself in all sorts of trouble and hanging out with different sort of criminal elements and when I say criminal elements, I mean sort of juvenile delinquency.
Yeah.
Got yourself stabbed. Lived in cars. Really, I mean, and this is from the age of 10, if I'm correct. So I'd like to know. I mean, I know obviously your relationship with the Shamrocks and being taken into the Shamrock Boys' home was instrumental in, I guess, in rehabilitating your life and getting you back on track. But I'm really interested in how that experience growing up and I guess the mentality that comes from living on the street and relying upon yourself, how that influenced you as a fighter and your career in fighting. Do you feel like there was an emotional impact or a mental impact from that time that stayed with you?
Yeah. I think that especially when you're almost like you wake up every morning and you're going to be in some sort of fight or scuffle or argument for things as little as space, territory, clothes, bed space. It just became almost a way of life for me when I started in it, 10 years old on the streets, stealing from stores because I had to have food, robbing people from money on the sides of the road or kids coming home from school. This is all between the age of 10 and 13 years old, where I found ways for me to survive. Not the best, obviously, but considering I wasn't taught anything, I hadn't learned anything, I was basically a wild animal. And I found ways for me to survive at other people's expense. As time went on, I got into a group home after failing a bunch of them and started learning, how to be important because, when you're in those situations, you don't feel like you're a good person, even though you don't know what it is, but you don't feel right. You just don't feel good about it, but you do it because you have to. Then you get into a position where you get into a home like the group home where you start being taught, I don't have to steal anything because I've got food. I got whatever I wanted because they had a nice home. There was food there. I didn't have to fight for space because I already had a bed. I didn't have to worry about somebody taking my space, my sleeping area. Obviously because it was a group home, you had to worry about people taking your things, and I got in lots of fights over people getting into my drawers or getting into my stuff, which happens quite a bit, but that's where you learn to stand up for yourself and whatever may happen, you get beat up or you do the beating up, whatever it is, they got to know they can't walk in and do that this is not going to happen without them getting beat up or cut up or bruised up. And so it was just kind of the way of life. And so as I got older, I started learning, better ways to deal with situations, taking my anger out into positive things like football and wrestling. And of course, then on into fighting and pro wrestling and fighting. And that's literally where, when I remember walking into the ring when UFC won, where people were freaking out after the first fight where Gerard Goudreau kicked Tui, I believe it was Tui, in the face with a kick. And everybody's like, that's not what I signed up with. No, it is. But it was people go, well, why were you not so nervous? And I kept thinking to myself, I used to get thrown in jail or get beat up or stabbed or even shot at when you got into these fights like this. And I get to go in there and there's actually one guy and there's a referee. Obviously, you don't know why they had a referee. There's supposed to be no rules. And I thought to myself, this is a day off compared to what I was used to. So there was not that anxiety that most guys felt being in a controlled environment. Obviously, I was in Japan and I learned how to do things right, but it wasn't like I hadn't been here, like I hadn't known what it was like. So for me going into it, it was like, oh, this is great, man. They're going to let us do this. as opposed to other people going, I didn't sign up for that. I didn't want to do this.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I just going back to what you said about fighting for space and your place in the pack and establishing a hierarchy, which we've on this show we've talked about that a lot when it comes to sort of real world violence. And I'm interested there whether there's a parallel. I mean, obviously throughout your career, you were known for being a man who didn't back down, who didn't tolerate disrespect. I mean, obviously your feud with Tito Ortiz was very much predicated on respect or the lack of respect that he showed your team. Do you think that was a hangover from growing up in that very sort of dog eat dog world where you couldn't tolerate disrespect?
Yeah, and it didn't matter that that he was 24 or 27. I don't remember how old he was in his prime, and I was like long in the tooth, out of my prime, injuries. It didn't matter because if he was going to be disrespectful, we were going to fight right there. We weren't going to wait till the event because I just kind of it's the way I was kind of raised in a sense. And then I was educated on what not to do, but I wasn't educated to not stand up for myself or to not make sure that people do not respect you or take advantage of you. And that's okay. If the other guy is game, like we used to go out back when two guys wanted to fight in the group home, my dad would let us go out back, throw the gloves on and go at it. And so this was kind of the same thing where it's like he was game and he was being disrespectful and we're going to fight. So yeah, it was one of those things where it was something that I was used to doing and something I was used to. And whether you got beat up or whether you did the beating up, it didn't matter. You had to stand up and make sure that they knew that you were not going to be punked or taken advantage of.
Yeah. Just backtracking a little bit, I was just watching your podcast with Mike Tyson recently, and I'll try not to eat nuts through the whole podcast this time. But I'm not going to call Mike on that. More than happy for him to do whatever he wants. But you mentioned that sport was through football and wrestling was really the thing that gave you meaning or gave you purpose, and I guess established you in your own mind as being important and having value, because suddenly you're being recognized by others in a positive sense rather than just a troubled kid or a kid with a lot of potential that was being wasted. And then you go for the state wrestling title and you break your neck and you're told you can't do any contact sports again. I mean, I'm guessing you're like 18 years old and all of a sudden everything's over. Now, we know that you didn't listen to that, obviously, but I'd like to know, like, emotionally and mentally, how was the recovery from that? Like coming back from being told, no, you're never going to do this again, to now, obviously having made an entire career out of proving that diagnosis wrong.
Yeah. I was 17. I was 1 month away from my 18th birthday. I was a senior. I had already finished football. I had schools looking at me. I was wrestling. I had been undefeated that year. And had schools also opportunities for wrestling in other schools and ended up breaking my neck in practice. It was crazy too, because when it happened, I remember just laying there and not understanding why I couldn't get up. Like I just, whatever reason, I couldn't get up. And then hours after that, or maybe it wasn't hours, but I mean, I mean, laying there for a minute or two, and then also feeling the sharp pain just go down my arm. And I remember them trying to get me out. I couldn't get up. And I remember they came in and put a clamp to board on me and clamped me down and took me away. And went to the ambulance. It was 2 hours away in Redding, California from Susanville, Lassen County. We drove to Redding in an ambulance. to get me there because of the severity of the break, I guess. So they drove me all the way to Reading, got there, and they did all kinds of scans and, all day. And then in the evening, I remember they came in, and my Bob Shamrock, who was the guy that owned the group home, who later became my father, was sitting there. And I remember Doc comes in and slides the x-rays up there and shows this neck. And, you don't have to be a doctor to know that there was something wrong. It was like, yeah, it wasn't where it was supposed to be. And he said that, okay, you broke your neck. And I was like, okay, all right. And so he says that we're gonna have to go in and we have to do surgery. He started explaining the procedure. This is back when they were going to go through the back of the neck instead of the front, and they took a bone chip out of my hip, and they were going to fuse that disc that had got smashed in the middle and the bone that had fractured on top of that, where it had slipped off. So it was like this. It slipped off to right here, and it was just barely on, and it almost cut my my cord. I mean, I was then I've been dead. Yeah. So it was that close. And that's why even in the hospital, when they put me in there, they had me in this bed to where it had a hole in it. And I was facing downward. And I had to watch TV looking at a mirror on the ground that shined up to see TV. And then they would flip me back over and then take the top of the bed off, but I couldn't move. And they had me in this harness thing. And it was crazy because I didn't know the severity of it. I mean, I was constantly wondering, how long am I going to be in here for? When can I get back? And I remember he came in, I don't know, it was a day, next day, whatever. I know it was for a while. He comes in and basically starts to explain, that when the procedure is going to be done, he already told us what he was going to do and what to expect. And then the things going forward, like I'm going to have this halo on my head. And that my balance is going to be off. And so I got to be careful when I'm walking and going around corners. And I'm like, okay. And so I remember going, okay, so how long until I'm recovered? And he said, it depends. Everybody's different. It could take a year, it could take a year, 2 years, year and a half. So it depends on you. And I was like, well, I'm a fast healer. It says I'll get through this and I'll get back to doing what I was doing before. I want to get back to wrestling and football. And it almost went quiet. He said, you broke your neck. And I go, yeah, I know. But, so a year or so, 6 months, a year, I could probably get better in 6 months. He goes, no, you're not. Listen to me. You broke your neck and you can't play contact sports. I was like, and if you know my background, if you know my history, I didn't become relevant. I didn't have people helping me or noticing me or making me feel important until I started playing football and wrestling. Then people started reaching out and helping me, and all of a sudden I became relevant. And now all of a sudden, after 3 years of doing everything I was supposed to do, getting my grades up, working hard to be this nice kid. And in one instance, that wasn't any fault of mine, that it's just going to be taken away from me. Like, I can't do it anymore because of this. And it's like, okay, so what am I supposed to do? Because I don't know anything else. And I remember my dad says, oh, and the doc ended up leaving, and I was getting depressed. And I remember my dad said these words to me that were magical. He said, you can lay there and pout about it, or you can do something about it. He says, you're the only one. Nobody can tell you that you can't do something. You can do whatever you want to do. You just have to make sure that you're willing to put the work in to do it. Man, you could do whatever you want. You could go to college and be a lawyer. You can be a teacher or a PE teacher, counselor, whatever you choose to do. But in my mind, when he said it, it was like, no, I hear you, but I want to play sports. I want to be in sports. So I didn't say that to him, but in my mind, I'm saying he's right. I mean, this doctor doesn't know me. He doesn't know what I'm willing to do to get to where it is I want to go. He doesn't know me. Like, How can he say that? Because we're all different, right? We're all created differently. We're all created to do things that most people can't do if we follow what we're supposed to be doing in life, and we could become great. And so in my mind, I'm saying, I know who I am. I know what I'm supposed to do. So this guy can't tell me I can't do it. And so I remember, I mean, I went through all the phases. I got the halo off. I was off balance. I even got in fights with the halo on and tore the bolts out of it. I mean, I didn't allow this thing to be a handicap for me. I wouldn't allow it to be a handicap. And then when I got it off, it was the same thing. I went to working out and training. I put on 60 pounds. I mean, I lost 40. And then I put on 60 after I got it off. And I remember playing college football at Shasta College because no schools would touch me.
Yeah.
So I went and played at Shasta College, Junior College in Shasta, All-American, first team All-American. I led the team in tackles. I was the defensive captain. I mean, I did all of this within 2 years after I broke my neck. And so it's something I like to go back on when I hear, especially in today's world, where everybody seems to be a victim. Don't play the victim, because all it does is get you a few pat on the backs. People feel sorry for you. They may write articles about you, but in the end of it, you are still broke. You're still doing nothing. So they made money off of your story, but your story still remains with you and you're still a nobody. Do not become a victim. And that's something I keep trying to push to anybody that I get a chance to talk to who are going through struggles. Yeah, you may have a struggle. It's not your fault. And all these things are bad. And you've been wrongly accused or wrongly this or wrongly that. But the bottom line is this: is what are you going to do to be successful after that? Because nobody cares what your story is 20 years down the road or 10 years down the road. You're going to be broke. You're going to be sitting there going, well, what about me? They don't love me anymore. No, they don't. They never did. You're the only one that's going to love yourself. You're the only one that's going to get yourself where you need to be. Do not become a victim. Do not let them allow you to become a victim, because you won't work as hard.
Man, that's powerful. I mean, we're talking to a man here who is world famous for defying that diagnosis, and could have just as easily been a guy sitting at a bar stool talking about how he could have played college ball if he hadn't broken his neck.
And it would have been a great excuse, but but again, like I say, the fact still remains: you are still in the position in where you begun. So do not allow these type of things and the people around you allow you to relax on adversity. No, fight through adversity. Do not relax on adversity. Do not become a victim.
Yeah. Awesome, man. A lot of MMA fans will obviously know that you started fighting in Japan, and that you fought in the early UFC, took some time off to go do pro wrestling. But a lot of people don't realize that you actually got your start in pro wrestling as Vince Torelli. I'm just curious, how did you end up transitioning from playing college football to pro wrestling the first time?
Well, it was that same scenario where I went and played college ball. I did really well. Led the team in tackles, had no problems with the neck, did everything that I was supposed to do. But yet I couldn't get any schools to look at me or give me, any scholarships, because, even the ones that I had thought were interested in me out of high school, the faucet had been turned off. There was no takers. And I couldn't go and spend that kind of money on college. I didn't have it, and my father didn't have it. And so it was time for me to do something else. And again, it's one of those things where, you rise to the occasion. Everybody's talking about your broken neck and how you came through it, even back then in college. And it's just an amazing thing, man. You just this, but it did nothing for my pocketbook, And so I had to figure out, okay, where am I going from here? And so, my father talked to me. He said, hey, Buzz Sawyer's got this thing down in Sacramento, which was a 2-hour drive from where we were at. It's pro wrestling, man. He was a superstar. You want to go maybe try pro wrestling. And I said, okay, let's go do it. And so went down there and did it. But Buzz ended up, dying. Rest in peace, Buzz. But he ended up passing away. And so then I had to find another area. So my father found a place in Mooresville, North Carolina, which is 3,000 miles away. So my dad sold his business, which was a group home. And we ended up picked up and moved to me and my wife and kids. We moved to Mooresville, North Carolina. I believe I was 26 years old at the time. And we moved there and I did the tryout. And, 6 months later, I'm carrying the strap for Buzz Sawyer. So that's how I got into pro wrestling. So it was a very unique journey for me to get to where I am today, because of the road that I traveled wasn't in that direction of being a fighter. It was more of being a football player and then a pro wrestler.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I know you trained a lot with Dean Malenko at the time, and it's always sort of, I guess it's one of those points, like if MMA had been a viable career in the late 80s, early 90s, it's really interesting to see how many guys that maybe came out of college football or came out of wrestling that ended up in pro wrestling may have ended up as fighters if that had been an option at the time. I look at guys like a Dean Malenko or a Dr. Death Steve Williams or even, going way back, like a Danny Hodge. Like those sort of guys could have been really incredible fighters if that had been a viable option for them.
It's no question, because when you look at, and let me give you an example of that. When I was in Japan and I was working with Fujiwara Gumi, Funaki and Suzuki came to me and said, "Hey, we want to do this new organization. We want to separate and want to do this thing." They said, "Because we want to do hard style." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Hard style. We want to see what it's like if we were to take pro wrestling and make it real." And I was like, what? Like what? He goes, "Yes. And we want you to come. We want you to be our gaijin, our guy to represent the gaijin, which means foreigner." And I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "We want it to be real, like no predetermined outcomes." And I was like, "Okay, I'm in. I'm a fighter, right?" I was like, "Yeah, let's go." But still confused, like how they were going to do it. Like, okay, well, how does that work? And so I remember we ended up doing it. He came down to San Diego, and Suzuki and Funaki, they visited me and the family and worked on their diet. I gave them some stuff to help trim up and to be in more condition for fighting. And then we had our first match at Pancras, and I fought Suzuki in the main event and ended up beating him, which was the first real fight other than the Don Naka-Nielsen in the Fujiwara Gumi organization. But that's when I think that you looked at it and you go, is this what pro wrestling looks like when you don't have predetermined outcomes? And it is. It's exactly what it is, because all these guys were pro wrestlers that Funaki, Suzuki, all of them, and myself, that went into the ring and said, "Let's turn pro wrestling real." And that's what we did. And that's what you got when you got Pancras. And that's the same thing you got when you got the MMA world. It's the submission holds, it's the throws, it's the kicks, it's the punches. Same thing as pro wrestling. The difference is the ending is not predetermined, but it's the same concept. And that's what I think a lot of people who are MMA that hate wrestling don't understand. It's this almost the same thing, other than the ending being predetermined.
Yeah. And look, and that's how I got into MMA. I grew up doing martial arts, but my passion was pro wrestling, and then seeing you in the late 90s, I think, what was it, WrestleMania 13, when you debuted as a referee in the Bret Hart Steve Austin match. I'm not sure where they found that small girl's t-shirt they put you in, but you looked like an action figure. Skin tight referee shirt, and then the wrestling magazine started covering UFC, and I dug back, and I remember looking at the first UFC I ever watched was UFC 3, and my I was a teenager, and my friend founded a video shop, like probably a Blockbuster or something, and I remember watching that going, "Man, this is like wrestling but real," and it was super exciting. But I'm curious, UFC 1. Now, did you get the feeling? There's been a lot of controversy, a lot of histories that have been done on UFC 1 now. Did you get the feeling this was being set up as a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu infomercial? or was it really marketed as a real fight? Did you think it was a real athletic contest to see who was the best, or was it being set up to benefit of the Gracies? What was your perspective as a fighter?
Well, I mean, like I said, I didn't have a whole lot of understanding what Gracie was anyways, right? I mean, I didn't. So I wouldn't have known that they were setting it up as a infomercial for their style because I didn't even know who they were. So going into this thing, all I thought was a bunch of guys who were, into different even karate and wrestling and whatever else, kickboxing, boxing. They were just different disciplines, and I thought, well, I'm gonna crush these guys, and didn't really understand what Hoist did. I knew he did some arm bars and some stuff like that, but it just didn't sink in that it was anything like we were doing. And then Eddie wore a gi, right? So it was like, and that was a mistake on my part, obviously, because Hoist Gracie and the Gracies were tremendous at what they did. And they had been doing these challenges in their gyms for years. So they were already well versed in this type of fighting, which I had been doing the pancreas, but it was more the open hand strikes. You could grab the rope on escapes if you got caught in a submission. There was no closed fist to the face, to the body only. So it was a big difference. And of course, I wore wrestling shoes too, which supposed to be no rules, but yet they said you can't wear shoes. It's a rule. You can't tape your hands because it's a rule. Which I remember there was a lot of fighters that were pissed off because a lot of those guys were making money with their hands, right?
Yeah.
And so now you're telling them that they can't protect their hands, and now that you're talking hundreds and thousands of dollars that Art Jimerson makes in a boxing match, and you're telling him now when it was supposed to be no rules that he can't tape his hands. So now he's going to wear a glove out there, which now he's at a real disadvantage because he can't tape his hands and he knows he makes money to support his family with these. And now if he goes out and hits somebody in the head, he breaks his hand, he can't fight for a year. So what's he supposed to do? So it was all these things that had played into this. That was more my thought when they took my shoes away and all these other things that were going on. It was supposed to be no rules and all this stuff. That was really when I went into it, I was thinking it didn't matter. I'm going to fight anybody, anytime, any place. And I always had thought that. And so for me, it didn't matter. I was fighting. And I think that's where you get when I didn't have a team around me, I didn't have somebody to say, hey, Ken, you can't do that. That's a big difference. We were so uneducated. We didn't know that you can't do that because it's a big difference not wearing shoes as to wearing shoes. Because I wore them all the way in my wrestling career, my high school career, my wrestling career. And then, of course, in the pancreas, I wore it all the way through there. And then go into this and now take them off 24 hours before you're supposed to fight, never walking on the canvas without having some sort of shoe on. It was a big difference. So, yeah, it didn't matter to me in the beginning and why we were fighting. But after it was over, we had realized, oh, wait a minute, this was really a setup for them to get their Gracie Jiu-Jitsu system over. And they did take it and they did take things away to kind of sway it. They made the card and who you were fighting first tougher for us rather than them because it was their promotion. And when I look at it, we did what we did. We all had a choice to say no or yes. We said yes. So period. It didn't matter after that. We could have fought it when we did. We didn't. So that was on us, period. Now, if I'd have went in the second time and fought him and, they didn't adhere to some things, then yeah, I'd be angry. But I'm not angry at that because it was an infomercial for their system. They've been doing this for years. They've been working on trying to get the system out there for many years because it works. And they want to be able to share their grandfathers with the whole world. And they were able to do that. So when you look at it, yeah, it was infomercial. Yeah, they swayed it in their way. But it's a business and they were in control of it. And so therefore they were going to do what was best for their business, period.
Yeah. And look, I think your inclusion actually gave a lot more credibility, even in hindsight, looking at the lineup of fighters. I mean, they could have very easily stacked the deck and had purely karate guys and stand-up fighters who had no idea about submissions. But the fact that you were in there actually presented a bit of a more even playing field because they put someone in there who had some idea how to defend against submissions.
Well, yeah, but that wasn't their call. Art Davies was the one that did that.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, Art Davies wanted me in there as his dark horse. Like he was going, okay, let's challenge them. Let's see if they are as good as they are. And then they were. And so you can't take it from them. But once you give people, and even myself, a chance to understand what's going on. And I didn't have to get a chance very long. Remember, I had two and a half years of experience. You know, they've had their whole lifetime of experience in this, right? So half a year later, I think 6 months later, I fought Hoyce again. And I beat whatever, but I beat him up. I left marks on him, right? And then they were never the same. They left after that. So it didn't take long for us to catch up to what they were doing.
Talk us through the big transition, leaving MMA in your prime, really in your physical prime, and going to WWE or WWF at the time. What was that? Was it just about the money? Was there something else going on as well that sort of led to you making that decision? Because I guess for all intents and purposes, walked away from a sport that you'd helped create at a time when you're probably at your best.
Well, it wasn't at my best, that's for sure. I had knee problems, which hindered me quite a bit towards the end of that. Yes. But really the only reason why I walked away from that was because I had conversations with Bob Meyerowitz, and that, I was supposed to get paid a certain amount of money after my contract was up. All of a sudden they started having these issues with the venue being shut down. Even after they had already set up the venue and everything's supposed to go, you'd have attorneys and these different politicians come in and want to block it for ways of getting their name out there and creating some interest in their name by going in and trying to shut this violent sport down, which made big news in that area. So there was a good opportunity for a lot of politicians to get their names out there by going in and shutting these events down, or at least trying to block them from going on. And so Bob Myers was spending a lot of money on attorney fees, constantly going to court all the way up until the event. And so they were spending a lot of money. And so they were struggling. And so when my contract came up, Bob Myers said, hey, I can't pay you what you want. And we had a good conversation. It was like I've got 3 gyms. I've got a boxing, kickboxing gym. I've got a grappling gym, and I've got a power training gym. And then I've got a group home that has 6 boys in it that I pay for. And then I've got my own house. And then I have a fighter's house that's got 7 fighters in it that I pay for everything. So I was footing the bill for all these things. And so I could not continue to keep doing what I was doing if I was going to stay in this MMA world and fight. So I told Bob, I just can't support my family this way and my business this way. I've got to do something else. And so it was a good conversation. And that's where I started looking elsewhere to see whether or not I would be able to. And it was a risk because I didn't know if I was going to have to go back to doing, working in a group home full time and working with kids and not fighting. But luckily Vince came around and offered me a great contract to come in there and be with the WWF, that I was able to keep all of this fighting stuff going, keep the group home going, and support my family. And even during this time, I had even my own fighters, my brother, it was just, they turned on me, some of them, not all of them, because I left. But what I didn't, it was none of their business. What they didn't understand was that I couldn't continue to keep paying the bills on the fighter's house, which they were living in. And I couldn't keep paying for the training facilities, which they were training in. I couldn't pay for that stuff if I didn't go and do something else. But I didn't say that to them because I didn't want them to get nervous. I didn't want them to have to worry about that stuff. But it backfired on me because then they got angry at me because they thought I had walked away from it, which I didn't walk away because I wanted to. I walked away because I had to, because I didn't want these guys to fail. I didn't want them not to have a place to train. I didn't want them not to have a place to live. And a lot of these guys depended on me to be there, along with the group home kids and along with my family. And so I made that decision, a financial decision, to walk away from something that I loved and go into something that I didn't know whether or not I would like, only because I knew it would pay my bills Fortunately, I fell in love with it, and therefore it worked out well, and I was successful at it. So I wouldn't be sitting here today if that would have failed, because I would have been laughed at, or I wouldn't have the reputation I have now. And so I'm very fortunate I was successful at it.
And then you're friends with the biggest actor in Hollywood history, which is also kind of cool. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious, what was harder on your body, the fighting or the wrestling?
People ask me this all the time, and it's got to be wrestling, because it's just the grind that we would do week in and week out. With fighting, you train, every day. It's fine. Like going to a gym, you work out hard, get ready. But then when you get into a fight, you got 6 to 8 weeks. You go hard, you train, and then you get into a fight. Sometimes you get hurt, sometimes you're not. But in wrestling, it was like constant grind all the way through the week. You were lucky to have 4 days off in a row. We were running strong and hard. It's probably not quite as bad now, but back then, if you took time off, somebody took your place, and so you would grind. You would make sure you made the shows and you put on a great performance, whether you were hurt or you were injured. You had to go in. You had to make sure you showed up.
Mm-hmm. When you came back to fighting, your style was quite different. You seemed to spend a lot more time on your feet. There's a lot less wrestling and ground game. Was that just a factor of injuries?
Yeah, that's one of the decisions when I had walked away from MMA, was I was going to allow myself to heal up, because I had torn my ACL and fought on it for a year.
Yeah.
I didn't blow it out. I just tore it. So I remember just in training wearing braces and tape. And then when I get into the fight, I just had to, be careful with it, but I couldn't shoot. I couldn't do the things I needed to do. So then when I went back into MMA, I worked a lot on my stand-up, so that my takedowns, if I was into a takedown, it would be off of somebody else's shot. I didn't have to shoot. And that was a lot easier for me to get top position, is when I would punch at them or kick at them, they would shoot on me, and I was good enough to defend the takedown that I could be on top. Unfortunately, it didn't work that way when I got into more of the top competition like Tito Ortiz, because I couldn't shoot. It hurt me because I couldn't keep him off balance, and he was able to shoot it well.
Yeah, yeah. Looking back at your life, you obviously, you've got a hell of a life story, and I'm sure it's going to be documented. I know you're working on a book. I know that. I feel like your life story has got to be a movie at some point. I mean, there's got to be something. Do you feel like fighting played a role in, I guess, giving you a sense of peace or a sense of self-worth?
Yeah, absolutely. Same thing in high school, where I felt like I was worth something, or like people cared about me because I was good at something. So when I got into the fight world, I was getting paid for it. I became famous through fighting and wrestling. It was almost like I could go in and I could just, when I got in the ring or the cage, I could be me. I could just go in and fight and show my passion and show my anger and my frustration, and that people just ate it up. And but it wasn't I was trying to do it for show. That's just what was inside of me. That's just what I was letting out, and it just seemed that people loved it, and so it worked out. It worked out well as a vent for me to be able to let out that stuff whenever I'd be all packed up with this angry frustration, and I could just go in and just let it out.
Yeah. All right. I've got some listener questions. Obviously, I've got a lot of listeners that are big fans of yours. And the first question comes from Josh Taylor, who's actually a pro wrestler here in Australia, Giant Coyote. Hey, how you doing, Coyote? He's currently, I'm just following him on social media. He's currently laid up in hospital with a really badly broken ankle. He's got an ankle halo on. He's facing 6 months in a full leg cast after the halo comes off. Pretty bad news for a guy who's a giant. But anyway, his question is: you've had some pretty huge injuries in your career. Has there ever been an injury that's made you think it's time to stop? And what made you say no?
No, see, that's the problem, is that because of my mindset, I would never let an obstacle detour anything that I was doing. I mean, like I said, I told you I tore my ACL, and I fought for a year on it. I should have got that fixed. But then that mean I'd take a year off. And I just, because of, hey, listen, the aggressiveness that I have, the mindset that I have, the determination that I have is a strong point for me, but it's also my weakness, because sometimes I don't step back and go, hey, you need to get this fixed, or you need to rest. But it's not there, right? I don't have that button that I can shut it down. And so that's a strength, but it's also my weakness. So, but there's never been a time where I've had an injury, even to this day, as I sit here right now. I don't have a switch that says shut it down, especially if somebody challenges me. There's no button that says you're too old, don't do it. I just do it, and whatever the outcome is, it is.
Okay, next question was, who do you think was the most talented fighter in the Lions Den, and who do you think would do the best in modern MMA if they were in their prime now?
Wow, there's there's a lot of them. Jerry Bolander, I thought, was very talented. Guy Mesger, obviously, with his mixed skills, wrestling and kickboxing, was very good. Man, there's just, like I said, there's a lot of, even Joe Hurley. It's hard to say, because remember, the guys that we got in were the guys that passed the tryouts.
Yeah.
And when we taught them, those guys had no quit. And so, there's probably maybe 2 or 3 of them that I would be able to say couldn't do what they're doing today. But as far as the rest of them, I think they all could. I think every single one of them, with the mindset that they had, would all rise to the top, because they have kind of the same thing I had, whereas, like, you're not going to give up, you're not going to quit, you're going to figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, Lions Den was notorious for that tryout, very Japanese style of let's see what you're made of before we bother investing in you. It was
Yep.
Yeah, it was incredible. Next question. Your fight against Don Fry is one of my favorite fights ever. How close were those ankle locks? And is he the toughest guy you ever fought? If not, who is?
Yeah, as far as toughness, I would say Don was right there. Definitely, no question. I broke his ankle. I mean, there's no doubt. Obviously, which was something that I don't think you were supposed to do, but he did anyways. He taped his ankle. I mean, literally taped it. So when I was turning it, I was like, dang, he's got big ankles, strong. But I remember hearing it pop too. Like, I ended up popping it. And yet he continued to keep fighting. Yeah. And so, to me, man, me and Don are good. We're friends now. And I would say he's, as far as if you're talking about tough, a guy that take a beating and just keep going, yeah, he was the toughest. If you're talking about tough as far as a guy who has all the skills in the world, has got a great chin, well-rounded fighter, there's a few of them out there, because remember, I fought all championship fights, semi and main event, never anything less than that. So I fought all the best. So there's quite a few of them out there, and I don't think it'd be right to name one of them. But if I was to say, as far as toughness, like an Oleg Taktarov tough, where just take a beat and just keep coming, that would be Don Fry. Yeah, no question.
All right. Is there anyone from your era that you didn't get to fight that you wish you could have? And is there anyone from the current era you wish you could have fought in both your respective primes?
I've been asked that several times, and I come up with the same one all the time. And it's not that who I didn't fight, but who I fought, but I was too late to fight him. I mean, I was way at the end of my prime. And and the only reason why I say this is because I think the world of him. I think he was a great fighter. I think in his time, he was the best pound for pound. And I just felt like there was so many great fights we could have had for the fans, and what we talked about for generations is Tito Ortiz. If we would have been able to fight each other like he was in his prime and I was in my prime, we would have had some friggin' brawls. And just because of the mindset that we both have, and of course our styles of the way we fight, we're grind straight nose in there and let's go. But unfortunately, it didn't happen like that. Tito was in his prime and I was out of mine, and I was going in and just fighting the best I could. And So he was a tremendous fighter, but I would have just loved for us to be able to go at one another, to be able to put on some great fights, but it didn't happen. But that's one that when people ask me, that's what I would say.
Yeah. Anyone from the current era you wish you were 30 years old again and can get in there with?
John Jones, no doubt.
Wow.
And Moachik. I think Moachik's another one too. I think especially the style that I had, whereas, I had a great takedown. I was really strong, but when I got your leg, nobody could get out of it. And with the style that Moachik has and Jones has, if I was able to damage their ankle, even if I didn't tap them out, it would be a big part of their game that would be gone.
Mm. All right, next question. Was there a definite moment where you felt like you had passed the torch to the next generation? And what sort of emotions did that bring up?
Yeah, I did. And it was Tito, and I knew that. I knew going in fighting him, even though I believed I could win. I really believed that was a moment where we were literally passing the torch. And I knew it in the back of my head too, that this is going to be where I start passing something on to someone else. And Tito was a great, like I said, even though we had our feuds and people think we hated each other, and we did at the time. But when it's over, I'm not that guy. I'm not that guy in the ring, and that's what I want people to understand, is that what happened between me and Tito was between two fighters that were trying to go after one another and to try to establish themselves. And that was it. And once that fight is over and that fighter is done, then you get, the Ken Shamrock outside of that, which is, is a family guy, and respect what Tito has done and appreciated what he has done for the sport as he does me.
And look, that UFC 40 event, I think that was equally as pivotal in UFC history as the Ultimate Fighter 1, which is I guess put on the pedestal as being the thing that legitimized the UFC and made it mainstream. But I really think that started with UFC 40.
Yeah, people want to argue about it, but if you look at the numbers tell it all. When you want to talk about legitimizing UFC, well, it was me and Tito that were in the fighter's house. Booyah. If you want to talk about the fight itself, which is UFC 40, yep, it was me and Tito. Yep. And so, yeah, anywhere you look, it's got Ken Shamrock on it, and it's got Tito Ortiz on it. Period.
Yeah, I agree. Last listener question for you. You're in incredible shape at age 56. What does your training look like now? I mean, I'm looking at you right now, dude. Your veins on your biceps are bigger than my head. You're in better shape at 56 than I've ever been in my life. What are you doing?
Well, I've talked about this before, where I had stopped doing everything. I took a year off. I left the UFC. I left King of the Cage. I stopped doing any MMA. I walked away from pro wrestling and didn't do any of that. And for a whole year, I just didn't do anything. Just hung out with the family, went on vacation, did things, camping, did all kinds of stuff, just to enjoy life. And I'd never done that. Like, I've never taken more than a month off from training, just never done it. And if I got injured, I was still training. So I never really did that. And I kept hearing this whisper all the time from other people about how rest makes you better and being body a chance to rest and recover. And I just never did that. I thought it was more like 48 hours after you're done working out or something like that. But I never looked at it as far as being at peace. And so when I took that time off, I also went and did the bioaccelerator in Medellin, Colombia, where they were putting stem cells in there because I had some issues going on, and it just really hindered me from being able to work out. And once I did that, I took the time off, did the stem cells. Someone had asked me, hey, and it hurt because they said, hey, you looks like you're losing a lot of weight, which I was, because I wasn't doing anything. And I was like, yeah, I haven't done anything for a year. And it's like, oh, okay. And it just kind of like, just ate at me. So I said, I'm gonna go work out. I'm gonna go get in shape. I'm not gonna do anything. I'm just gonna get in shape. So I go in there, and probably 3 months into it, Instead of someone going, hey, it looks like somebody goes, hey, dude, man, you looks like you could fight, man. Are you gonna be fighting soon or what? It's like you're getting ready for a fight. And I was like, no, I'm just staying in shape. Of course, it got planted in my head, like, oh, maybe I can still do it. Because I felt great. I mean, I really did. I felt great after the stem cells and the rest and everything. I felt rejuvenated. And I said, I'm going to do this again. So we started researching some places, BCW in Australia. They brought me in, and I remember doing dives on the top rope, hurricanranas, and I was like, I feel good.
I was in the crowd for that, for the BCW show. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like crazy feeling good. And I was like, let's keep going with this. And of course, then Impact came in, and I started doing stuff with Impact a year ago, Bound for Glory with Moose. Did the same stuff, some crazy moves, I didn't practice doing anything, just did it, just went in. And now I'm sitting here today. I'm going to be inducted in Impact Wrestling Hall of Fame the weekend of the 23rd, 24th. And then, of course, I'm doing Bound for Glory against Eddie Edwards. We're going against each other the 24th of this month. And so I feel great. And I keep telling people, I said, I still got a long way to go, man. I got a lot still to accomplish.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. All right, I want to talk just a little bit about what you're doing now. Obviously, you're doing Impact as well, but you've also got Valor Bare Knuckle, and I'm really interested in that because I mean, you fought in literally every era of MMA. You fought in the pre-UFC with the pancrase rules. We're just trying to figure out what this thing actually is. You fought in early UFC where we're really trying to figure out what everything is. We've got police interventions before fights, telling us we're not allowed to punch or you're not allowed to kick if you've got shoes on, or the rules are changing from card to card. You've done the modern unified rules, the modern rules. You fought Muay Thai. You fought pretty much everything. What is it that's drawn you back to the very, very beginning of bare knuckle boxing?
It was a love of it, for one. When I first did it into the UFC, to me, it was such a rush to know that two guys were going to go in there and that you're going to settle it, literally settle it. And it was bare knuckle, and it felt so pure. And because it brought me, when we were doing that, it brought me back to watching these guys box. And then even in the MMA that we see happening right now, there are so many things that these guys get away with because they're wearing gloves. Boxing, you can block because you got these big gloves on. You're able to block your whole face and stop punches from coming in. And then when you punch somebody, if you don't hit them in the soft tissue, you hit them in the head, you still knock them out, your hand's okay. So you get away with not being a good striker. And having power, it takes away guys that have true power to guys that don't have true power, because then they can wind up and swing and not hit you where you need to be hit and knock you out and not hurt their hand. Then you go to the MMA part of it, where it takes away submissions, heel hooks, chokes. It's harder to do those when you got a bulky glove on. It also takes away the purity of striking, where a guy can tape his hand, put a glove on, 4-ounce glove on, and then punch you in the back of the head or the back of the ear and knock you out and not hurt their hand. So it doesn't seem to be any punishment or any pain to punching wrong. And so I thought to myself, if I ever got an opportunity, I want to bring back that purity of bare knuckle, where guys that are great strikers, that are accurate, get rewarded for hitting the zone and not being at a disadvantage for guys just swinging wildly and hitting anywhere they want to hit you and not damaging their hand. I just think it's much more professional. And a lot of people go, it's not professional. It is. I don't like the dirty boxing, which other bare knuckles do, where they grab the head or they punch inside. The rules that we set up are boxing rules. And we even go one step farther. We don't let them clinch. In other words, when they box, their hands open up, they get penalized. You can't grab or try to shift somebody by, or to grab them or tie up or box inside with the clinch. If you're going to do that, your hands stay closed. That way there's no eye gouging, because you don't have gloves on. So the hands stay closed, and that means there's more action in the clinch. You could fight in a clinch, fight out of a clinch, but the minute you grab it, the referee got to step in and break you. So therefore, we say if your hand's open and if you grab, you get a point taken, because you should be fighting, not clinching. So I think it's much more exciting. It's much more professional because you got to hit the target. If you don't hit the target, you're going to hurt your hand. So therefore, you got to ease up on your punches. Even if you miss the soft target and you're not throwing hard, you won't break your hand. It may hurt, but you won't break it. And therefore, it forces fighters, if you're going to throw hard, you better be accurate. You can't just be throwing hard and not being accurate and get rewarded for it.
Yeah, man, I love watching it. I've loved watching the I guess the revitalization of bare knuckle boxing. I can't wait to see how it changes combat sports, because I think it is it's an evolution. You know, it's a I love watching the old school guys, and I can't wait to see what the next generation does with it. In fact, you know what? We're talking about fights that could have been. The one fight for me as a fan that I really wish could have happened was you and Eagle Vovchanchin, but I know it was I know it was talked about in Pride, but I would have loved to have seen it back when both you guys were fighting bare knuckle, just to see what that would have looked like. That would have been crazy to watch.
Yeah, there's a lot of you look at and go, there's been great fights. You know, you talk about the Tito one, but there's a lot of them that I thought, especially over in Japan, where there were a lot of bigger heavyweights, that would have been great fights for me. And they were great matchups too, because a lot of those guys were just strikers, but had great ground skills. Whereas I was a decent striker, but my ground skills were great. So those kind of matchups are very, very interesting to watch, to see who's going to impose their will on the other.
Absolutely. All right, Ken, just in the last couple of minutes we've got, I want to hit you with some rapid fire questions. Are you good to go?
Yeah, let me do this though. Hey, listen, if you want to follow me and you want to check out Valor Bare Knuckle, valorbareknuckle.com. That's how you find out. We're going to be doing a bare knuckle fight the end of 2020, or possibly beginning of 2021. So Valor Bare Knuckle, go check it out, man. You'll be able to find out what we're doing, because that, like you and I both believe, that is the next evolution step in combat sports.
Absolutely. All right, here we go. Bonus questions. Question number 1, who is your favorite opponent, and or what was your favorite fight?
Yeah, I would have to say my favorite fight would definitely be the Dan Severn, where I captured the very first belt that sustained a weight class or a tournament. It didn't have a tournament. It was a single fight, and it was champion against champion. And that was the guy that wore the belt. All belts go through that. So to me, that's got to be the most important one for me. As far as opponents go, man, I've had a lot of good ones. But I think when I realized that I had actually had become be able to stand on my own, it didn't have to be led by a trainer, is when I fought Funaki in the very first pancreas organization, and I beat him, because before that, in the gym and everything like that, I couldn't get him. It just felt like we would go at each other, and it was good competitiveness, but it just seemed like he always knew what I was going to do. But before I went into that fight, I remember setting up and being able to change my technique and my setups, so he didn't know how it was going to go into a choke or how I was going to set up for an ankle lock, because he had already known everything that I had done before. So I had to spend months on going in and setting up all of my setups for my submissions so that he didn't know they were coming.
Yeah, what a crazy experience. I'd have to fight the guy that trained you, basically, and try to surprise him. That's as a lifelong martial artist, it's always the hardest thing to fight the person who taught you all your tricks.
But you know, the thing that worked out on that was, like, when I got him in the side choke, normally I would gone into that and I would hit it and I would muscle into it, and he would always figure out a way to scramble out of it. On this one here, I just did it. I tried it several times, but it was almost like at half my speed. And like, I just kind of lulled him into it, where I was just there, and he was still trying to fight it, but I hadn't squeezed on it yet. So like but normally I would go after it and squeeze it, and he would fight out of it, eventually get out of it. But then when I did, if you watch it this time, I kept putting it in there and I would get up there, but I never really like went to squeeze it. It was almost like I wasn't powering into it. I was kind of lulling him to sleep and not panic, because I wasn't throwing it in hard yet. But as soon as I knew I had, I locked it up and I got him with it.
Yeah, wow. I'll have to rewatch that fight now with that insight.
Yeah.
All right, second question. Who's had the biggest impact on you in your study of martial arts or fighting?
Say that again?
Who has had the biggest impact on you in your study of martial arts or fighting?
Oh, I think Funaki, because like I said, he trained me, and I had no experience before that. So he was really my only person who had really trained me. So he's the only person I really looked up to.
Yeah. All right. What do you think modern fighters could learn from the fighters of the past?
Just don't get me in trouble. But I just think, I think it's just tough, the toughness. You know, back then we didn't have a whole lot of money. We would fight 3 times in one night. So I think what they learn in this is just appreciate the time and the things that you have, and enjoy it, man. Don't get so much caught up into the business part of it. Enjoy yourself.
Yeah, actually, I was just chatting to Ensign Inouye a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying sort of the same thing. I mean, it's a different world when you couldn't pick and choose your fights based on money because there wasn't any money to begin with. So yeah, it's a little bit different being a fighter nowadays, where you got to think about your record a little bit more.
Well, you just got to enjoy it. I mean, that's what we did. We enjoyed doing it, or we wouldn't be doing it because, like I said, at least in the beginning, the money wasn't great. It was because of something we wanted to do.
Yeah. All right. The next question I have for you is, what do you think is the biggest myth about you?
Oh, well, there's no doubt in my mind. I think people have a misconception on my character and who I am. Anybody that knows me personally will tell you it's not the same guy you see in the ring or even outside the ring around fights, because I was so focused and so determined. But when I'm around my family and my friends, I'm very lighthearted. I'm very easygoing.
Yeah. Don't be a mark, Ken Shamrock. Ken Shamrock's a real man. He's also a performer and a fighter as well. So don't buy the hype all the time, huh?
Yeah, but the one thing you don't want to do is have me flip a switch either. So like I said, don't get in my face or say something.
He's probably not going to belly to belly you through the kitchen table, you know.
Right.
All right, last question for you, Ken. Given everything you've accomplished with the legacy that you've left, what do you still hope to accomplish, and how would you like to be remembered?
Yeah, I think my accomplishments now is more towards motivating people, letting people know that, you know, you can accomplish whatever you want to accomplish, and that if you can put the work in and you have the desire to do it, and you work hard and you'll do whatever it takes to get where you need to go, you can accomplish anything you want. I think now I have an opportunity, being at the age I'm at, to be able to share that with people who may be struggling later in life because maybe they're depressed because they had to retire from their job or this or that. I mean, life doesn't end. It doesn't end because you've accomplished something and now it's over. It's just a different journey now. You got to figure out what you want to do from this point, and then go do it. And then also too, it also reflects on people who are just starting out, whether it's in fighting or whether it's in a job or whether it's just in life, that you got to understand obstacles will come. They will come. And you will have an excuse to be a victim. But if you do that, it's a waste of time. Do not allow people to pat you on the back and give you a hug and tell you it's okay, because it's not. It's not okay, because the longer you wait to get back out there to get things done, it just becomes much more easier to become more of a victim. So shed that victim stuff, shed that reason to be depressed, shed that reason to not want to go out there and work because it wasn't fair what happened to you. It doesn't matter, because in the end, no one cares. The only thing you have to do is make sure you get back up off the ground and put the next foot in front of the foot, in front of the foot, and accomplish your next goal, period.
Man, what a powerful note to leave us on. Ken Shamrock, kenshamrock.com, valorbareknuckle.com, the legend, a man who's had a tremendous impact on my life and my career, and it is an absolute honor to have spent the past hour chatting to you and hearing those messages from you. So thank you very much. I wish I could shake your hand. Hopefully we'll get to do it at some point face-to-face in the future.
Thank you. I appreciate it, man. God bless you guys, and thanks for having me, man.
All right. Thank you very much, Ken. Thanks so much for listening to the episode today, guys. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you're a long-time listener of the Managing Violence podcast, I hope you enjoyed hearing it again. But if not, thanks for tuning in and joining us in the War on Mediocrity. Please follow us on social media. We're everywhere at War on Mediocrity. We're on Patreon at War on Mediocrity, and we are also live on our website, waronmediocrity.com. Make sure you check us out.